You got a marriage on the rocks and it's starting to suck. You've got some intimacy issues and your sex life's stuck. Put yourself in the hands of Mrs. Jessica Weeks. She's got all the marriage hacks, tips, tricks, and tweaks. She's bringing truth about marriage, laying myths to rest. Taking on the hard topics no one else will address. Put your earbuds in and listen up real close. Be here every single week and make sure you take notes. For some expert advice way beyond common sense. Take your everyday marriage to a marriage of confidence.
You're listening to the Confident Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica.
And I'm your host, Sean.
The no fluff, straightforward, real talk, real world experience, and practical solutions. Sean and I talk about what no one else will.
And we're funny too. With everything for your family and relationships, from the playroom to the bedroom. We're the podcast that has couples talking.
In more ways than one.
In more ways than one.
So if you're joining us for the first time, Sean and I are a husband and wife team. Mm-hmm. We've been through quite a bit in our marriage.
Quite a bit.
From betrayal trauma to simple communication problems that we've had.
To those little things about the other person that annoy you.
Yeah. So if you're like a majority of couples out there, you're either looking for ways that you can reconnect again emotionally, spice up your sex life, or maybe you're experiencing some kind of betrayal trauma.
Yeah, no matter how big your problem is or small your problem is, chances are we're going to talk about it on this show at some point.
Yeah. Sean and I work with couples all around the world,
mm-hmm.
and we have been doing this podcast for about 1.5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal and our passion is in helping you discover ways that you can improve your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to our topic, because this is going to be something that we've talked about once before, but we're readdressing it, and it's pornography.
Yeah, it's such a big one that we did a show about it, and we had to do another one because there's just so much to talk about. And who doesn't love to talk about porn?
Exactly. This time we're going to have a very special guest on. He is a specialist in betrayal trauma.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he's a porn star.
And he is an expert in pornography addiction.
Yeah, actually, he's really good. He's a friend of the show. We've talked to him many, many times. His name's Joshua Shea.
Mm-hmm. He's been on TED Talks. He's written several articles. He's been interviewed by some of the biggest news stations. He has been written about in magazines. He is a former council member.
Mm-hmm. He was in local politics.
And so he has struggled with porn addiction himself, and he now works with men and women alike in their porn addiction.
Mm-hmm. And betrayal trauma as well. He's
Yes.
got a lot of great insights, and I know you all are going to love the interview.
Yes. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. And don't forget to visit our website, www.theconfidentmarriage.com, and sign up for our newsletter.
Yeah, our website is the hub of everything Confident Marriage. So we have our articles, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We have all our podcasts. We have our resources page. We got a little bit about each of us mm-hmm. and why we do what we do and how we got here. Mm-hmm. So everything Confident Marriage, www.theconfidentmarriage.com.
Don't forget to join us on social media, too. We're on Facebook at Confident Marriage, Twitter, The C Marriage Show, and Instagram at Confident Marriage.
Yeah, we love to interact with you guys, hear back from you guys, and see what you think of our posts. And we're always getting good stuff up there, so check us out.
Yeah.
So let's get it on about porn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put in as many sex puns as I can in this one. So
it's very much like you, Sean.
So let's dive right in and dig deep, real deep.
Pornography is a really touchy subject.
Touchy-feely, I'd say.
You were not kidding when you said you were going to throw puns in there.
No, seriously, though, porn is not like it used to be, at least when I was a kid.
No, it's so accessible now with the internet, and you can find anything that your heart and mind could possibly imagine up online now.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, like, when I was a young, impressionable 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, it's like if we found even a page from a Playboy magazine. It was like gold, like, ah, and we hid it and we like cherished it and worshipped it and like used it till it was disintegrating in our hands.
That is disgusting.
It was really, it was, but that's how it was. And now, like, God forbid you found a kid whose parents had like a good stash, and then it was like even better. But still, it was all pretty vanilla. It was poorly produced. There wasn't a lot of variety to it. It was rare, far between. And I know most boys, if not all of them my age, had experience with porn, but nowadays, God, you can get like any imaginable anything at your fingertips, like as vanilla or as like
raunchy.
Yeah.
As you can possibly get. One of the things that really scares me about porn and having a son is that I don't think as parents we ever imagined that our children would come across that, and yet they do. And they do it at a very, very young age now.
Yeah, and I think I heard a stat. I think Joshua actually talks about it during the interview today, that 10 years old is the average age that males are exposed to it. And it has such an effect on an impressionable mind. It changes the wiring in your brain, and it affects the view of sex that you have. And
yeah, well, even if you're older when you get into it, there's the book, The Porn and Your Brain on Porn, and it talks about how it rewires and it changes your brain, and it causes you to think about sex and women in a way that isn't reality.
No, and I said it on my article this week, and I think I used capital letters even to say, porn is not reality. It's not an education tool for learning about sex. It is it's a fiction based on something real that's used for entertainment purposes.
Well, and I'll take it a step further in that I don't think that that's really realized. And so a husband sees that, or even a single man sees that and becomes married, and then he encounters his sexuality with his wife or his significant other, and then can even become disappointed because the sex isn't like it is on porn.
Well, I wouldn't even say can even become disappointed. I would say that for a lot of males, they are exposed to pornography at an early age. It's raunchy, and the male is usually the dominant figure in it, and they're doing all kinds of crazy things that you never even thought of before. And when you see that over and over again, when you're in your early teens and you're developing, and you're especially developing your view of what sex should be like, you come into your sexual maturity and you start dating and you start to have your first sexual experiences, and you're thinking, well, this isn't at all like it looks in the movies.
No.
She's not bending into 100 different positions, and not letting me dominate her, and she's not peeing on me, or
oh goodness, too far, Sean Weeks.
There's no goats with leather masks on.
Okay, I'm
sorry, was that too bad?
Oh my god. I want to touch more on, though, that
who's making the sex puns now,
right?
Touch away, baby.
The way that women feel when they find out that their spouse is watching porn. Betrayal trauma with porn is real. It's a real thing. It's not exaggerated. And I think the reason why men, and even sometimes other women who haven't experienced that before, might think that a woman is exaggerating when she feels that kind of betrayal, is that for a woman, sex is very emotional. And so we can't quite understand the disconnect there for men, from physical to emotional, because it's all blended together for us. And so it automatically makes us question who we are as a woman to our husband, our bodies, our looks, our mind, our value to our husband. It really does crush us in a way that men can't quite understand.
Yeah, not just your perceived value to your spouse, but your self-worth. Also, I think disconnect is a great word, because I think that there is a huge disconnect between how men view porn and their porn use, and what it does to their spouse, especially if that spouse is a woman.
Right.
And
exactly.
I don't know how it goes so much for if you're a man and you find out your wife is doing it at...
I don't think it has the same effect.
No, I think that society has that stereotypical thing of like, oh, my wife's watching porn? Oh, that's kind of hot. But it doesn't do the same thing to women. And this was a... So this, when this was a problem in our marriage, this was something that I couldn't comprehend and I was in denial about, and I didn't quite believe, because I knew what it was for me and I knew what it meant to me, and I knew hands down that it didn't have anything to do with any lacking in my wife. It didn't have anything to do with her per se at all. It was, for men, it's much more of a pressure-free, instant release, instant gratification, stress relief. It tends to fire those same centers in your brain that are associated with addiction and with drug use. You know, it gets that dopamine going. And it's not about wanting to be with someone else. It's not about that these women are more attractive than your spouse, because even through my porn use, it was always much more satisfying to be with you, you know, sexually, than it was ever to masturbate and watch porn. But there's some draw to it that keeps men coming back to it, and it's not that their spouse is less than or that they're not measuring up. And women don't understand that. To women, it's a personal attack on them, their womanhood, their worth, their looks. You know, it really does severe damage. Betrayal trauma with porn use is real.
It is. But let's circle that, because we've touched on a couple different things. So we've touched on how porn affects a young male's brain, and then how he views women and sex later on in life. It can sort of even distort an adult male's brain who should know better, and maybe even at times make him feel disappointed or seem disappointed in his sex relationship with his significant other. So then help us bring all that together to understand, well, then how is it not our fault if you or another man has an idea of what sex should be like or could be like, or the erotica of it, what have you? How does that not have anything to do with us? It almost feels like there's an expectation or an idea of what sex should or could be like, and we're not able to meet that.
Right. So there's an expectation of what sex should or could be like, but it was an expectation that was created from a source that's not based in real life. It's based in fiction that's made to entertain. Women aren't going to be able to live up to that because it's not real. But it's created a real expectation in the man who's viewed it from his formative years and doesn't really know anything different.
Right.
And you know, that creates a little bit of a shock when they have their first sexual experience and it's not like they think it's going to be. And then that may lead to all kinds of other bad things, like going to the extreme to try to chase a sex life that is more like porn, or causing them to create a secret habit that they hide from people so that they're able to get that from porn when they're not getting it at home. You know, it makes them feel like they're missing out on something, when in reality it's like, you know, when our daughter watches those YouTube videos and then we see her acting like off the chain the next day, and she's acting like those people in the YouTube videos, and we have to explain to her that's not how people act in real life. They're playing it up for the camera because the video you're watching isn't real life. It's made to entertain.
Yeah.
Porn is made to entertain. It shouldn't be taken as how you should be expecting your sex life to be. Now, there are elements from porn that many people incorporate into their sex lives in a healthy way. Maybe there's some certain act that you like to do and you and your wife can get into it together, or something like that, but it's not going to be like how it is in those videos all the time.
Yeah. And I think that creates so many problems in a marriage, because men are not educated properly and they don't really know. And so it hurts the marriage, because in ways they're disappointed, but then in other ways they realize that it's not real. And I think that's where the communication needs to come in, and the discussion, and being able to get to know one another on an intimate level, and what your wants and needs are, and what you're able to compromise on, and how you can find a way to connect intimately together in a way that is satisfying for the both of you, that's healthy.
Yeah, well, I think an open, honest conversation about sex between both of you as equal players in it, you know, hey, you know, I've always seen videos of people doing this and I've always wanted to try it. Oh God, I couldn't do that, but I'd be willing to try this and this, or I've always wanted to try that. And talking your way through it and figuring out what works for both of you and making sure you're comfortable with it. And yeah, open, honest conversation never hurts anything.
Right.
But there's another insidious aspect to pornography that plays right into something that I struggled with through most of my life, and that's addiction. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say by any means that everybody who looks at porn is a porn addict. No. And I think that term porn addict is thrown around a lot to use as a scapegoat for men who are doing something they shouldn't and want to find a quick excuse, and B, used by their spouse to kind of demonize maybe an occasional use of porn. There's legitimate clinical porn addicts out there, and porn does affect the brain, and the research about this is still new and it's still coming out, but it is proven, it is based in fact that it hits the same centers of your brain that drugs and alcohol do. It hits those dopamine centers, it hits those addiction pathways, and it has a lot in common with drug abuse and with other addictions like gambling, in the sense that it keeps you wanting to come back for more. Mm-hmm. But after a certain period of time, you got to kind of, in my article, I call it up the ante. Like what you were looking at pornography-wise now may not do it for you in a couple months from now, and you have to like go to something bigger, and that can open the door to some really bad places. Right. So it's a lot like an addictive substance. Yeah. It's very dangerous.
It is. And they talk about that all the time in psychology and how it can rewire your brain and change you. And so you got to be really, really careful, because porn, you might think that just you're viewing it and you're watching it, how could it possibly do anything to you? But if you think about it logically, we all know the effects of what we listen to and what we watch and what we do has an effect on us. Right. That's been studied for decades now, right, and proven. Well, if that's true for our everyday life, why wouldn't it be true for something as deep as that? Mm-hmm.
And look, there's a huge debate about whether porn is a morally bad thing or not, or whether you can use it responsibly or not. And we touch on that in the interview.
Mm-hmm. We most certainly do.
So I think we should get to the interview, because there's a lot of good information in there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce betrayal trauma specialist, porn addiction expert, author, and speaker, Joshua Shea, friend of the program. It's good to have you here, Joshua. How are you doing today?
I am doing fine. Thank you for inviting me on the program today.
You're welcome. We did a live interview with Joshua. Well, Jessica did.
I did.
A couple weeks ago, and it went really, really well. It was a really good interview. I had to watch it because I was on my way home from work when it happened.
Joshua and I had a great time talking about porn without you. But that's why you're here now, honey. Mm-hmm.
Joshua, why don't we start off by having you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, I like to deal my brand of justice. I'm a porn addiction expert. I guess that means that I was a porn addict for 24 years, until I got my act together. I was also simultaneously an alcohol addict, and I took care of both of those addictions at the same time. I entered recovery in early 2014, so I'm coming up here on 7 years. In 2018, I released my first book, which was called The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About. It was kind of a memoir about the last 5 or 6 years of my pornography addiction, while looking back at different things that contributed to it. When I wrote that book, I expected that was just going to be it. I wanted to put something out. There wasn't a lot of pornography-related materials or pornography addiction-related materials that were out there for the general public. Now, I'm the kind of geek, because I'm a journalist by trade, who likes to read studies. I can sit with the New England Journal of Medicine at night and be like, oh, this is interesting, and can read all that language, and I'm fine with it. And I'm the guy who says, I recently read a study, and I actually am telling the truth. I recently read a study, but I know the average person doesn't do this stuff. So I decided I wanted to write this book. I thought that would be my contribution to the world, and then I would go off and do whatever. But what surprised me was just how many women got in touch with me after that book came out and said, I have a husband, your story sounds like his, I've got a boyfriend, I've got a brother, a son, I think he's a porn addict, and I'm going to describe him. Can you tell me about it? Can you tell me if he's right, if I'm right? And then after some of that, I started, in talking with some of these people, I started to hear more about the betrayal. And, you know, is he this way because I'm not enough in bed? Is he this way because, you know, I did something, or you know, I'm not pretty enough, or whatever it was. And it was interesting because I had, at that point, never heard of betrayal trauma. I had gone through this with my wife, but you know, she didn't ask a lot of those questions because she you know, has a background in health and medicine, but so she understood the addiction, and it was very clear that I was an alcoholic for years before that. I realized that not only, you know, even more than men who were addicts, there were women who were dealing with their addicts who truly had no resources. So I teamed up with a licensed marriage and family therapist out of California named Tony Overbay, because he was telling me, you know, as a therapist, I hear at least once a week people say to me, you don't know what I'm really feeling. You've never been an addict. You don't know what this is like. And it's real. And I've talked to my own therapist about this, and she said it's really hard to come back from that, because you have to admit that they are right. And you have to admit that this is a unique experience that unless you go through it, you really can't explain it. It's like being in a foxhole in war, or probably being an astronaut. I mean, there are only a certain people who can tell you about these circumstances, and you can read all about it, and you can learn about it, and you can talk to people with it, but you have not experienced it yourself. So he had to deal with that. At that time, I was, you know, throwing around the idea of doing some coaching, but I was still very hesitant to give any solid advice because I hadn't done a lot of work learning about being a coach or learning about true betrayal trauma. So I didn't want to play Tony's role when I was talking to people or answering emails. So we decided to create a book for the partners of porn addicts, where we went through Reddit, we went through a ton of betrayal trauma boards. He referred to questions his clients regularly asked. I looked at questions that people were sending me, and we came up with a list of 60 questions, and we answered it from both the expert's point of view, and we answered it from the former porn addict's point of view. So you got the, you know, academic kind of side of things, who's a guy who's worked with a million people, and then you got the nitty-gritty details with me. And that book came out at the beginning of 2020, and it's still doing very, very well. And that's the reaction to that book, the amount of podcasts I've done, and the amount of people who have come to me asking for more help. This has kind of taken over my life, and in a good way. I mean, I'm not making the kind of money from it I need to fully survive, but I think that's a matter of time. That's figuring things out. That's the world opening up more to the concept of pornography addiction and recognizing it's something that needs to be addressed. You know, it's weird in that I'm not a real super religious or super spiritual person, but I look back at my life and I recognize I wasn't supposed to be a journalist. I was also a city councilor. I wasn't supposed to be a local politician. I was supposed to go through all that so I could get to where I am now. And I know that I am helping people, and I know that I am helping more people than I hurt. And I'm hoping that overall my existence on this world, when my time comes to an end, is that it was a net good. And I think that if it's a net good, then whether I make $1 or I make $1 million, if I'm helping people, if I'm leaving the world in a better place, hey, props to me.
Yeah, I think we can echo that sentiment completely here. Your story with addiction and my story are quite similar. I too had some substance abuse issues for a long time that were very plainly obvious, but one of the things that followed along in that substance abuse was pornography abuse and pornography addiction.
And it was hand in hand with the substance abuse. In fact, a lot of times if I couldn't get the substances I was addicted to, I substituted with other substances or with pornography, because it had the same reaction in my brain, the same chemical reaction.
Right.
It stimulated and used the same pathways in my brain. I don't think a lot of people understand, and maybe it's hard for them to reconcile because it's not something that you consume by smoking or injecting or eating or whatever, but it very much fires those dopamine centers in your brain and uses the same pathways that addiction uses. And let's clarify too. So when we say porn addiction, porn can be used responsibly, right?
I am moving further away from that. There's enough science out there that shows that there are a lot of people who do not develop issues with pornography who use it. And I also will say that I'm not going to go down the moral or the trafficking roads of why it's okay or why it's bad or any of that. There was a story that I was told the last time that I went to an in-person presentation at a college here in New England, and it was to a women's sexuality group at a health center, and there's probably about 18 to 20 women in this room, most of them in the college age group, a couple of older ladies. And I gave my typical presentation, throwing out statistics. I mean, this was all pre-COVID, so I'm throwing out my statistics, and I'm doing my little song and dance, and I get to the Q&A part of it, and there was this one sort of mousy girl who hadn't said or seemed to respond to anything the whole time, and she raised her hand and she said, "So, do you ever hear from girls and women my age that they don't want to have sex with virgin men?" And I said, "No, but honestly, I don't talk to a lot of girls your age. My daughter's 21, but we don't really talk about that kind of stuff very often." I said, "No," but I noticed the eyes of the other young women in the room lighting up. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because people are kind of paying attention now. What are you talking about? What does this have to do with pornography? And she started to say, well, you have just told us that the average boy sees pornography for the first time now around 10 years old, and he starts watching regularly at about 12 years old. Now, most of these boys are not having sex, and they won't have sex for many years. And I immediately realized where she was going with it. Her point was that, let's say that the average guy is now having sex or has sex 17, 18, some are even 19, especially the ones who, kind of are a little bit more college oriented. What have they had for their sex ed for 5, 6, 7 years? They've had pornography. And we can, just take the most straightforward vanilla porn in the world. One guy, one girl, even the most straightforward porn, usually the guy is the aggressor. Usually the guy, at one point he has his hand on her neck. He's saying horrible things to her. He's bending her in 101 different ways, and it's not done the other way around. The man is the aggressor. And this doesn't even get to the point of how almost, the degrading way that almost all of these movie clips end. And the thing is, that becomes the normal sex act for these guys who have not had sex before. This is what they see. This is what they think they're supposed to do. And, if you look at statistics of, things like anal sex, if you look at statistics of things like three-ways, all of these typical male fantasies, they don't really happen very much in real life at all. Right. They might happen when people are younger and experimenting, but in most marriages and most people over 30, those experimental years are over. And we understand, those of us who have been in healthy sexual relationships understand something that those 14, 15-year-old boys don't, is that pornography is fiction. Pornography is not a documentary. Pornography is not a reality show. Pornography is complete fiction. And, the three of us get that, but how is a 14-year-old boy going to understand that? Right. So, they may never be a porn addict. They may stop watching porn someday. But when they finally get to that point, their freshman year of college, what these women are reporting, and I've spoken to many more since I first heard this, over a year ago now, is that these guys immediately start acting like the porn stars they see. And this is not just an isolated thing. These women do not want to train these guys how to be sexually healthy, because they're not sexually healthy. They're entering the realm of intercourse for the first time with all of these ideas in their head of who they're supposed to be. And that's not who women want to be with.
Right.
So when you say, can porn be used responsibly? Is there a problem with porn? I look at this, for instance, and I see that because of the high-speed internet, because we give every 12-year-old boy the greatest porn computer known as a smartphone, and just send them on their way, I think there's an argument to be made, especially among our youngest, that pornography may not be able to use responsibly depending on when they started, and it may be an unhealthy thing and creating unhealthy attitudes towards sexuality. Because I'm not anti-porn, I'm not pro-porn. What I am is pro-healthy sexuality and anti-unhealthy sexuality. And I think that porn is contributing more to an unhealthy sexual world than a healthy one. So that's my long version of why I think ultimately, can you use it responsibly? I'm sure there are people who can, but I think there are a lot of people who use it in an unhealthy way without even realizing it.
No doubt, no doubt. And I know that from my experience and from the research that I've done, when you start watching it at a young age, and because of, just like you said, the way that the male role in pornography and the female role is portrayed, there's an objectification of women that happens, and it's something that you can't help. It happens in your brain almost as a reflex to the repeated watching of it, and it colors the entire way that you, number one, look at women, number two, treat women, number three, how much you respect yourself sexually. It really has a profound effect on your view of sex and females in general. There's an objectification and a loss of respect, and they become an object for your pleasure rather than a person.
Well, and I don't know about your individual origin story, but most of us have some kind of unresolved trauma that leads to addiction, whatever the kind of addiction. In porn addiction, there's a lot of sexual abuse, there's a lot of mental abuse, there's a lot of physical abuse in male porn addicts. That was found through Patrick Carnes, early groundbreaking studies, and I was similar to that in many ways. And the abuse that I dealt with both at a babysitter's house and from the overall family and the way they lived their life, incredibly inappropriately, especially having small kids around, it was two women, the babysitter and her daughter, who were 99% of the problem for me. And I think that was part of it for me on a subconscious level. When I got into pornography years later, it was almost a way I repressed a ton of memories, and I know pornography helped me do that, but I think it was the sexual aggressiveness involving women. That was one of the things that drew me to it, because that's what I had to deal with when I was a kid, and seeing a version of that on at that point the pages of a magazine in a weird way helped me move beyond it.
I want to go back a little bit though to the healthy sexual behavior as opposed to the unhealthy sexual behavior. And I think as a woman whose husband struggled with pornography addiction, one of the things that really struck me was how incredibly difficult it was for me to accept the fact that he was taking his sexual energy and putting it elsewhere, when I was always there for him, and I had never turned him away, and yet that was where he chose to put his energy. And it really does take away from that intimacy that you have with your spouse, and that energy and that desire and that need. And then to add to that, the fact that a majority of women, we can't add up to, we feel like we're not on par with these women in these videos, and so our body feels like such a shameful, ugly, not good enough thing. And that women already struggle so much with body issues. Right. And to have that put on us too, that we somehow need to add up to these porn stars. I can tell you, after losing 150 pounds and having 2 kids, there is no way my body is looking anything near like a porn star's. And I already struggle with that.
Right. Well, there are very specific genres where you do, but let me ask this: in the addiction, though, in your other addictions, were you feeling super sexual? Did you really want to be having sex, or were you looking for the alcohol? Or I don't know what drugs you did or what else you did, but one of the things that I always have to remind women is that I understand that pornography addiction, because it involves naked people, because it involves the sex act. It's very easy to confuse with it as a substitute for sex. And in a very weird way, I think that the spouses and the partners of porn addicts almost have it a little bit better, because they've actually got a sick guy on their hands. The women who have guys who just use porn to get off and that's it, that's a whole other issue. If you talk to gambling addicts or heroin addicts or alcoholic addicts, all of their sex drives drop. Addicts don't have big sex drives. And so it's very easy to make that leap from, he doesn't want to have sex with me because he prefers the porn. And the thing is, no, he doesn't want to have sex with you because he doesn't want to have sex. He's not up to it. And no matter what his addiction is right now, he's not up to it. And that's proven across a ton of different addictions. And I actually wrote about that on my website recently, and put up an article where I went through, I think, 8 other addictions and pointed out how the sex drive drops. Because I think that's something that a lot of women do make, that what seems like a logical leap of that they are replacing sex with me with pornography. And the thing is, while sex with you, because obviously you're in love, you're partners, it does take place on a higher level. But even if the partner, if you were not in the partner's life, he would not be out there getting laid every night and not looking at pornography. He would be home looking at pornography, because he's an addict. Porn addiction does not take place between the legs. It takes place between the ears. And that's what I have. One of the things that is a cornerstone of the betrayal trauma teaching that I do is to try to, really get the woman to understand that the act of intercourse, the physical intimacy that comes from it, that's not what a guy gets looking at pornography. He is not getting the same things that you provide him when you're making love that he is getting when he is, going to his addictive self. That's a very hard thing to understand, and I know that takes a lot of time to process that idea. And you can look at stats, and you can look at others' testimonies, but it is something that you have to get through on your time. Your pain is real. I understand it. I appreciate it. As the person who was on the other end and caused pain at one point, I certainly understand and appreciate it. But I think one of the reasons that why a lot of women like to work with me as a betrayal trauma coach is because I speak the language of the addict and I understand the addict. When the addict says they don't want to hurt you and then they do something absolutely stupid that hurts you, they actually don't want to hurt you. It's not they're not getting off hurting you. They're not, ignoring this. They hate the fact that they're an addict. I've never met an addict who was really excited about the fact that they're an addict. Addicts recognize that they are addicts, even if they try to pretend that they're not. And they don't want to hurt you. They love you more than anybody else on earth. They wish they were clean, but they're not. That they're sick, and they're full of shame, and they're full of not having control, and they're full of all of these feelings that ironically make them use even more to escape those feelings. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from, but on a completely logical level, on a completely scientific level, you're making a few connections that are not truly there. Emotionally, I understand it, but you're making a few connections that are not correct.
And that was a huge problem for us trying to get over that hurdle was that I couldn't understand why she was feeling hurt in the way she was feeling hurt, because I went through the feelings I was having when I was using pornography, and I knew internally that it was the same as the drug use and the alcohol use, but I couldn't get it across to her, and she couldn't understand that it had nothing to do with her or some lacking in her, that it was purely an addictive behavior. And it was at a time in my life when I was putting some of the substance abuses out of my life, and naturally the only thing I had to turn to, other than, getting some healthy recovery in me, was to turn to the other addiction that I knew that I still had access to. So it became an extra hurdle to try to get over it, because she didn't understand why I was using it, and I couldn't get it across to her because to her it sounded like an excuse and lip service to try to get out of, admitting that there was something wrong with her or something.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do with a lot of my clients, or anybody when I'm giving a speech of some kind, that I urge them to try one morning, is to wake up and turn all of the alerts on their phone to full blast. Every beep, buzz, everything. Turn it up all the way, and then take a Post-it note and put it across the front of your phone, and then put that phone next to you. And within a few minutes, if you were an average American, you're going to hear some kind of beep or buzz. Somebody likes your Instagram post, or someone's texting you, or something's up, and you can't lift that off. You can't lift it off to look at it. You just have to leave the phone there. You have to sit with it. And a couple minutes later, you're going to hear another one, and you can't lift off the phone. Now, I've actually talked to people who have tried this after I've suggested it, and they say that they can get about 2 hours or about 7 or 8 notices into this, and then they have to rip it off and see what's there. And that is because we are, if not addicted, obsessed with our phones as a culture. And when we go to see, did somebody like the funny thing I said, or did somebody like the meme I posted, or somebody texted me, all of these different reasons why you use your phone. If you are trying not to use, you use them and you do all that because it's a dopamine hit. Mm-hmm. You feel good when somebody likes a status, and that's one of the ways that I try to explain to people who are not addicts. In the traditional sense, here's a way you can feel addiction, because by that 6th or 7th time you hear the chime, you're fiending. You want that thing. You need that you have to know what's going on there, and that's the pull towards addiction. That's eventually the addict thinks the only way they're going to survive is to rip that Post-it note off. Much like the average person thinks the only way they're going to survive. What if somebody's dead? What if somebody... You know what? When we were kids, we had regular telephones with no answering machines, and people still died, and you still found out about it. Just like they don't need to have addiction, but they develop these addictions without recognizing it, and it's hard to explain it to those who think they haven't developed obsessions or think they haven't developed addictions. But this phone experiment that I came up with randomly a couple years ago, I found it to be the absolute best way to show people what addiction feels like, because come that 6th or 7th chime, they say they could actually feel it in their body, that they're not allowed to go look at it, and they're almost feeling phone withdrawals 2 hours into it.
Yeah, and I like that analogy also in the sense that my addiction was very much like some alert ringing in my head all the time, and there was a need to go stop that notification from going off.
Right, and you think about it. I mean, I can talk about my life in that from 14, 15 years old, alcohol and porn were the two go-tos that no matter what happened in my life over the next 20 years, no matter where I was educationally or professionally or personally or anything like that, the two things that I always had were pornography and alcohol. Mm-hmm. They always eventually worked. They always did what I needed them to do. They were the two things that I could count on more than anything. Then you think about recovery. And what are you going to do to me in recovery? You're going to take away the two things that help me survive, that there's a piece of me that thinks I'm going to die if I don't have these things. So number one, you're going to take these things away from me. Number two, what caused this, all of this, trauma from this abuse when I was a kid, we're going to go and we're going to walk through that. Well, gee, that sounds like a hell of a lot of fun. And I can understand, and I've been to a couple inpatient centers, and I can understand why people just pop off and walk out 3-4 days into it, or a week into it. They will go off and go on a bender or find drugs or do whatever, hook up with somebody, because it's just, it's your body screaming at you that you're doing the wrong thing. It's your mind screaming at you that you're going to die if you don't keep up the life you know. Because what kind of a quality life are you going to have if you have to live with all of that addiction or all of that abuse and all of that trauma and work through it? And what kind of life are you going to live when you don't have these things? Your addictive substances to be your crutches. It sounds like a really raw deal. If you went to a store and someone tried to sell you this, no matter how many roses and unicorns they tell you exist in recovery, it makes sense that a lot of people don't want to do it, and a lot of people aren't strong enough to do it. But I think, you know this, and I know this, and the people who have successfully recovered or are successfully in recovery know this, it actually is worth it. And you just have to get there and experience it. But my God, I pissed away my 20s. I pissed away my 30s. My 40s have been great. My relationships with my family are much better. I feel like I'm doing something professionally worthwhile. Who knows how many people I'm really helping? Who knows how many people you're helping with the podcast? We're never going to know these numbers, but we're doing something good. We're giving something back. We're sharing our stories. And I know that you feel better than you ever have. And I feel better than I ever have. And that's what I hope that people who, are addicts or think they have problems, but think they can't get beyond it, it is worth it. It is so totally worth it. And I would have looked at myself and said, you're full of crap, but it truly is worth it. And I've never heard somebody successful in recovery say that it's not worth it. So with a 100% approval rating for those of us who get there, there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, no, I echo those sentiments completely. I'm happier than I've ever been and more fulfilled than I've ever been. And just for anyone who's listening who may be in the throes of an addiction or anything, I know that what we're saying sounds like bullshit, but it's not.
No, and it's, I've got to know my children as wonderful people, and I feel so bad that not only my alcohol and my porn addiction, but I had this workaholism addiction as well, where, I owned 2 companies. And like I said, I was also a local politician. A lot of that had to do with the fact that I like to be busy, because at the end of the day, there I was sitting by myself at my house, wife asleep, kids asleep, and I can't play, politics guy. I can't play magazine publisher guy. I have to sit there with who Joshua Shea really is. And that wasn't a comfortable thing for me to do, but now I can do that, and that's a wonderful thing. And being able to do that, it's amazing how everything is truly connected. And I don't know how you lived your life, but I lived my life with a series of boxes. I had professional life, I had personal life, I had family life, and none of these things interceded, but that was me gaslighting myself. The reality is our life is a jigsaw puzzle. Everything is connected to something else. And if it's not directly connected, it's only one piece away. And that's what I think that we have to learn to appreciate in recovery, is that we cannot compartmentalize. We don't have that ability. We're not doing it. We're fooling ourselves if we think that we do it. And once you learn to let that, idea of compartmentalizing go, it's so much easier, because everything falls under one umbrella.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Also, one of the things you do when you go through recovery is you kind of take everything out, all those separate boxes, and throw them into one box, and it all does go together. It all has a trickle down effect. It all builds on itself.
Absolutely. And none of these aha moments are bad things. The aha moments are amazing when you're in recovery, and when you make one of these connections. You're the only one who believes this puzzle is, you're keeping these puzzle pieces apart. But when you put them together and recognize, oh my goodness, this happened because of this, and I can deal with it this way, and oh my goodness, I have a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
I can see some of the picture, and you keep putting these pieces together, and eventually you have this picture of recovery.
Yeah.
And it's a magnificently magical thing, if you are willing to submit to it. I remember before I went off, the first rehab I went to was for alcohol, and I was kind of poo-pooing it a bit to my therapist who I was seeing at the time. She was pretty new, and she just looked at me and she said, do me a favor and just give it a chance. Just listen to what they have to say. Just give it a chance. And I was kind of that typical guy for 5 or 6 days who was like, no. And then I don't know what it was. Maybe they were tainting the food. I don't know. But on the 7th day, all of a sudden, it was like, oh my goodness, they're talking about me. I am exactly the person they're talking about. This is totally about me. And it was at that rehab where, I really, at the end of it, got to start to explore the pornography side of things. I thought that my porn addiction was just bad choices when I was drunk. I never heard of pornography addiction until I went to my first rehab. And my case manager had me meet with a certified sex addiction therapist off campus. And that's when I started to, when we started to get into some of the memories, when we, talked about the abuse, when we talked about some of my attitudes towards sexuality and the ways that I had made choices and lived my life. And, that was a giant puzzle piece, but it was like, oh, this isn't just another puzzle piece. This is a whole other puzzle that I have to deal with. But it's okay. I took that on too. And I'm here today, and I would rather be nowhere on a Friday night than talking to you about this stuff.
Well, we love having you on the show, and you are full of so much insight and inspiration. I can't imagine what it feels like to be on that side of the aisle where you know that there's a problem, but you don't know how to stop it and you don't know how to address it.
Well, that's how you get stuck in that shame cycle, which just leads to furthering the addiction.
It's wild because you get to the point where you just start to beat yourself up about it. And that's when you get into the point where you're making deals with yourself. Well, I'm only going to look at porn 3 times this week. Okay, well, 7 was close enough. And, I'm only going to look at this for an hour. And oh my God, 4 hours have gone by. And I still haven't found the perfect piece of porn to tickle the dopamine receptors. It's like being in jail. It's like having, wearing handcuffs. It's like, this isn't healthy, and you're still chasing that great high from, way back when. I mean, my high, I don't share this story a ton, but my high was when I was like 7 years old. My babysitter's daughter, who was, I'm guessing she was 19 or 20, she let me touch her breasts. And that was so sexually charged. I know that probably was the thing that, chemically or whatever it was, set everything off. Along with, it was part of it, but it took decades for me to see that as a violation. Because I always look back on that with huge fondness. It's the joke where you see the hot gym teacher and the 14-year-old boy, and every boy, why can't I be that boy? Well, because it's inappropriate, it's sex abuse. It's going to warp your brain, and that's what happened to me. And I had to go back, and I had to appreciate that something like that was abuse. It was inappropriate. It was not it did lead to a big mess. And it probably is the high that I chased with pornography for years and years and years and years and years. Was I was just trying to feel that rush of dopamine that I felt.
And I wonder how much of that is other men's stories in other ways. Because I know that women talk a lot about the ones that have experienced sexual abuse, and that we know that it's very common among women to be sexually abused. But I don't believe that it's not common in men. I think it's more common. It's not talked about. I think it's more common than society wants to give it into, and maybe that has something to do with the fact that, well, boys are boys, and it's perfectly normal,
and that's the thing.
And that's.
I'm sure it warped my brain the way that sex abuse warps somebody's brain,
Right.
but I'm telling myself the narrative of that was awesome.
Right.
And I'm telling myself that for years. And I told that story to many friends for years whenever there, a talk of sex or a first time or something comes up. And I think that, it was such an interesting stumbling block that objectively, it was like the betrayal trauma. Objectively, I could understand that I was the victim of sex abuse there. But logically, it didn't make sense to me because it was such a good memory. And I'll tell you, circling back around to betrayal trauma, I believe that a lot of my addictions were formed because I was betrayed by these people who were supposed to be caring for me, who were supposed to be tantamount to my safety. And while I have not read anything about this yet, I really want to start interviewing addicts of all types and go back to those early years and find out how much betrayal took place. Because what I'm starting to wonder and starting to put together, the more I talk to people with betrayal trauma and people with addiction, is that I think addiction might just be really unresolved betrayal trauma. You have to repress those memories. What memories are you repressing? You're repressing memories where somebody betrayed you, essentially. Somebody put you in harm's way, usually somebody who shouldn't have. And I applaud all women who go after trying to get the betrayal trauma fixed, because I've talked to women who their choice for betrayal trauma is immediately divorce, or their choice for betrayal trauma is lots of wine to get through it, and that's not healthy either. So we heard growing up everybody around the addict gets sick, and that's absolutely true. And that's absolutely true with pornography addiction as well. My hats go off to people, and mostly women, who are seeking the betrayal trauma route, because I think what you are doing is the best thing for your health, so you don't end up as an addict down the road.
So Josh, why don't you tell us where people can get in touch with you if they feel like they need some help with either porn addiction or betrayal trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is recoveringpornaddict.com. You can buy my books on there. You can learn about my coaching if you so want to go that route. But I also have a big page of resources. There are so many different modalities to getting to recovery. Some people like 12 steps, some people like therapy, some people do research, some people go on lots of podcasts, and some people host podcasts. But you can find a bunch of different links there to explore. I know a lot of people who are probably listening to us or stumble on my website are not fully ready to commit to massive recovery. I always urge people, first thing you should do, talk to somebody who is in recovery, talk to somebody who is a medical expert and get a baseline of where you are. If you think you're an addict, you probably have some problems with it, because think of all the things in the world you don't think you're an addict with. So there's a reason you're asking yourself that question. Check out my website. It'll help you answer that question. I've got all of the other interviews I've done with podcasts and then radio shows and TV shows. And for, any partner who doesn't want to, do face-to-face coaching, just wants to learn a little bit more about their husband's addiction, is worried that, the Amazon fairy is going to deliver a book that they don't want their husband finding. I do also have an online course that's available through my website that you can learn about there, with different videos, different modules that will give you the basics that you need to know. And I also write about it. As a writer, I write about recovery, I write about addiction, usually 2 or 3 times a week. Always updating articles on there. So I'm trying to make it a bit of a one-stop shop for anybody who either is a porn addict, is a partner of a porn addict, or just wants to learn more about pornography. So please do check out recoveringpornaddict.com.
Cool. I, like you, hope that I'm making a difference, and that I liked how you put it, that when they balance the equation of my life, I hope more good was done than bad. That there's positive outcome left in on the record books there. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, addict or not, that's really probably what more people should strive for.
Right. Well, Joshua, we love having you. We love talking with you. We're going to have to figure out a way to do it again. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Say thank you to Jessica for me.
I will.
I do hope we can do this again. I love talking to you guys.
No, we'll definitely figure out a way to do it again, and we will definitely get a link to your website up on our resources page so people can have access to that, because that's a whole lot of good going on there.
I appreciate that so much.
Thank you. No problem. Take care of yourself. Be safe out there. Stay healthy.
You too. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you, Joshua.
Joshua Shea, ladies and gentlemen. God, he is such a good interview.
He has lots of really great information, lots of personal experience, and lots of ways to help your spouse and yourself.
Yeah, and if you want to check out more from Joshua, we have his website up on our resources page. You just click the link. You'll see his picture and his name. Just click the link. It'll take you to his website, where he has a lot more good information about porn addiction and betrayal trauma, as well as links to all his works. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we shed a little light on a tough subject to talk about, pornography, and the effects it can have, and, got you a little understanding on what it means for men when they do it and how it affects women when it's done behind their back.
And it is a conversation that needs to take place if it's happening in your marriage, and if not, starting with a therapist at the very least, and finding a way that you can break the ground on this very difficult subject and find a way to make your marriage healthier and happier.
Yeah, and the key to getting through any problem is understanding. So understanding what was actually involved in all of it and understanding what it means to the other person is going to help you understand their side and help you both get to a resolution.
Yes.
So we know it's a tough subject to talk about, but like we said in the beginning, we talk about when no one else will.
Yes, and it's shameful too, and we understand that all too well.
Mm-hmm.
So
some of us understand it more than others.
We hope that this program was able to really help you and your marriage. We value your time, and we're glad that you spent this time with us. Don't forget to rate the podcast. Mm-hmm. We really do appreciate it if you find this valuable. That's the only way people can find us, is if you give us a rating. Mm-hmm. So we would appreciate that little boost of support.
We would appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well.
Yeah,
on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts.
Yeah, that way you'll get an alert when a new one pops up every Tuesday. Mm-hmm. If you want to hear them sooner, don't forget to
sign up for our newsletter.
You could do that on our website, www.theconfidentmarriage.com.
Yeah, you'll get the episode earlier, and you'll get both of our weekly articles earlier.
Yes. Until next time.
This is the Confident Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Sean.
And I'm your host, Jessica.
Have a good week, everybody.
Ta-ta.